Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome here in Vancouver, welcome at the Future Technologies Conference 2018. And my first guest today here is Derek Jacoby. He's from the University of Victoria here in Canada. And Derek is an expert on user experiences, and he first worked on speech recognition at Microsoft and now focuses on virtual reality applications at the University of Victoria. Welcome, Derek.
Thanks, Roger.
Hey, my first question, can you tell me something about your professional and personal choices which led you to where you are now in your career?
Sure, yeah. So as you mentioned, I was at Microsoft for about 10 years, working mostly on speech recognition. At my heart, I'm a computer scientist, but my undergraduate degree was in psychology, and so I've always mixed user interface design and computer problems. In virtual reality, it's primarily a translational science problem to me, taking the machine learning models that we're building with our research partners and finding ways of using VR to make them really engaging and interactive for people to experience them.
Yeah. What attracts you in VR?
Primarily the fact that you're teleported, transported to another world, and that world can be whatever we want it to be. If we approach that with an interesting educational perspective and make it what we want it to be, something that teaches you, and it can be about the environment or about some natural phenomena, then you can make it just as if you're there and so compelling to experience it that it doesn't feel like you're learning, but you are.
Yeah. Why is VR relevant in education? I mean, what added value does it bring versus more traditional ways of learning?
I think it has to be combined with it. What you lose a lot in traditional ways of learning is that sheer excitement of being in a new environment, of learning something new, and you get glimpses of it. A great teacher can really get people engaged, but kids today play so many video games, so many things that are just sensory, overwhelming experiences that we have to bring some of that just visceral excitement to their educational experiences too.
Yeah. Do you think the teacher-student interaction might suffer when VR is introduced in education?
I don't think it suffers, but it has to change a little bit. Right now, a really good teacher, their role is to inspire and excite students, and some of that remains, but when the content is created that takes some of that burden off of them, then they can be in charge of the more reflective aspects of education. And you don't learn without those more reflective aspects. If you just had a VR experience and nothing else, your learning would be about the same as you get from a video game.
Yeah.
It's only when you take that excitement that you had and translate it into, okay, now we have to do a bit of work and understand why you were excited.
So it's the combination.
That's right, absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, what type of education do you believe lend themselves best to VR? Is it children's education, student education, or maybe professional education?
Yeah, I think there are a bunch of different aspects. The one thing we've learned in the last couple of years is that as a professional visualization tool, VR may not be the best tool. If I'm working all day, every day with a set of data that I know very intimately, the user interface experience we can create in VR often gets in the way of that a little bit. And so really the best situations are where we need to get people engaged, get them brought and drawn into this world and excited about something, and not where over the course of weeks and months and years they have to work with that raw data. I'm right now focused on middle school education since that's really the exciting central point where students are starting to kind of lose interest in education and we're using the video game experiences in VR to draw them back in and make them excited.
Yeah, because that's what they do at home. Why
that's
not
right.
Bring it into the education system?
Exactly.
Yeah, good one. Hey, in your paper, and I have to read this, in your paper you mentioned that a VR prototype experience might be evaluated as the intermittent breaking of an illusion, and sometimes users tend not to recover from. What do you mean by this, and why does this occur?
Yeah, so there's in theater this a term, the willing suspension of disbelief. You can, in a theater setting, kind of break in and out of that. When your neighbor coughs, you might look at him, but you get back into that theater experience very quickly.
Yeah.
In VR, it's more difficult because you're in this totally different world. If there's a stutter and the computer freezes, well, your world's just frozen. And this is a very jarring experience. And so one of the big challenges is making sure that the experience is believable enough and smooth enough that you don't get jarred out of it, because it's very hard to put your whole world back together when you see that little blotchy blue screen and it goes away.
Yeah, can imagine. Hey, what are next steps in bringing educational VR to the next level?
Yeah, I think there's a number of different aspects. The main one is accessibility of the experiences. Right now with these studies, the first one anyways, we had a permanently set up VR experience in a room that was dedicated to that purpose, and big heavy headsets in that room, and so you had to be there to be immersed. In the second study that I wrote about in the paper for this conference, we slimmed it down to be the Google Daydream VR device. So a little headset you can throw in your backpack and just carry to classrooms with you. But what we suffered with that was a loss of fidelity. The Daydream device isn't as capable of as rich of experiences as the dedicated device. And so we're seeing a very rapidly changing field where devices are getting more realistic, smaller, easier, and we're right on the knee of this curve to where they're actually practicable for being in most classrooms.
Yeah. Hey, what obstacles need to be overcome before educational VR applications can be applied widely?
Yeah, so the hardware one I just mentioned is one of the obstacles, of course. Equally important, though, is a content creation obstacle. So all of our studies being in an academic institution, we use student developers. And using packages like Unity, we can get those computer science students up to the point where they can create experiences pretty quickly, but VR demands such a rich set of skills in terms of the art assets, in terms of the game design, in terms of the actual programming, that people have these expectations built in game studios where people have done this professionally for many years. To translate this back to where content can be created by the teachers, by other students, by the research organizations that want to convey ideas is very difficult. And right now the economic incentives to produce educational titles for VR just aren't there in the same way they are major games.
No. Hey, my limited VR experience so far is that it's a rather large, heavy and uncomfortable goggle and often attached to a large desktop PC, enabling you to play a sort of limited game. What do you envision will be the future application of VR, and perhaps not only in education?
Sure. So I don't know where ultimately this ends up, whether this is the contacts with screens in it or the other science fiction kind of devices you've talked about. But we're plainly on a progression where VR is getting a better resolution, where it's getting smaller, where it's getting faster, where it's getting cheaper. And all of this leads to a set of technologies that won't be bound by the limitations that today's current VR systems are. And this is without even going into augmented reality, which has the additional problem of being able to sample the world that you're in. And just looking at the excitement that some of the new devices in AR bring with it, we've got an exciting future ahead of us.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Derek Jacoby, we're going to follow this boy. Hey, when you want to look more videos, go to the website of the Future Technologies Conference. There's loads of interesting content over there. Thank you so much and have a good day.